Last night, so can we therefore please do a massive ba-ba-ba Eastbourne Towner cheer, whoop, holler and welcome Rosie Wilby onto the stage.
Oh, thank you. Give it up for Tim. Oh, it's lovely to be here, though I must say I'm really disappointed my carefully prepared talk about guinea pigs has had to be shelved. It was all to fit in with Guinea Pig Awareness Week. But no, I am Rosie Wilby, a comedian and podcaster, and thank you very much, the author of this book, The Breakup Monologues, which combines some of the very best and worst breakup stories I've heard on my podcast of the same name, with some of the science of heartbreak and how we get over it, and also my own story of learning from all my breakups how to finally stay in a relationship. And I'm now married, so it worked. Thank you. And my interest in breakups all came about a few years ago when I was dumped by email. What do we think of, thank you, yeah, what do we think of that? I did feel much better about it though once I had corrected her spelling and punctuation and changed the font. Breakup in wingdings is actually far preferable, I think you'll find. But I guess a breakup email would seem quite quaint and polite, wouldn't it now, in this era of ghosting, and there's a whole new lexicon of breakups, a whole new set of words to describe these new behaviours of people just disappearing, really, and not telling the person what's going on. And my favourite variant on ghosting, which is the word that describes you just buggering off, my favourite variant on ghosting is marleying, which is where you do ghost somebody, but then you pop up again at Christmas. And so the Breakup Monologues followed my first book, which was called Is Monogamy Dead, which was also a comedy show that I toured around. And this is really what I'm going to be talking about this evening. And this book and comedy show were inspired when I heard that in many surveys, around 50% of people confess to cheating. And that got me thinking, if you are in a monogamous relationship and you're not cheating, yes, you better look closely at your partner, hadn't you? Because simple maths says it has got to be them. And that show followed another show which was a kind of spoofy lecture about the science of sex and the sort of history of sex researchers over the past few decades, including the work of these two, Masters and Johnson, who, amongst many discoveries, were the first people to tell us that for a woman to have an orgasm, a penis was not necessary, a discovery that I think she looks slightly happier about than him in this particular photograph. So I decided I was going to do my own spot of sex research, and I conducted a survey asking what sort of relationships people were having on a sort of monogamy, polyamory spectrum. And most of the respondents defined themselves as monogamous. But what do we even mean by that? I mean, it comes from the Greek, meaning monos gamos, one marriage for life, whereas many of us have sort of adapted the meaning now, haven't we, to one marriage at a time. And cheer if you're monogamous? Yeah. Oh, you don't sound that pleased about it, do you? Yeah. But what I started to hear about a few years ago was that some people I knew were polyamorous, having many loves, multiple ethically declared, consensual, loving relationships. Have we got anyone who's polyamorous in? No, it hasn't reached Eastbourne. I tell you what, it definitely hadn't reached Aberdeen either. And what I particularly love about polyamory is, and it's not for everyone, but the people I know who have made it work for them, is that they've started defining a whole new language to define the new types of relationships that you can have. It's almost the compassionate opposite to the new lexicon of breakups. There's this whole new language of love, which I think we need, because in our English language, we've just got this one word, love, which is really overburdened. It means all kinds of different things, doesn't it? You know, I mean, I love chocolate and I love my wife, and one of those is an insatiable craving that never goes away. morning, but this is how I feel about my wife. No. But the thing is, I mean, going back to the Greeks, they had all these different words for all different types of love, didn't they? So I quite like the fact that the poly community have started devising this new language. And my favourite new phrase that I've heard is, if you're polyamorous and you feel you've reached your threshold of partners, you can say that you're polysaturated. And so, what was a little sad though, there was one person who was polyamorous but currently single. I thought that was like setting off, wasn't it, to go, oh, I'm going to have loads of relationships. Oh, I still can't even find one. So, yeah, and there were also some people who answered my survey who were having an open relationship, so having a kind of a primary partnership and then having maybe more secondary, perhaps more casual lovers outside of that. And this was a structure very familiar to me because within the gay male community, a lot of my friends have open relationships, and sometimes this can be a very, very successful, a kind of honest way of maybe having some flexibility around the relationship. And what we see is in many surveys, you see gay men reporting the most sexual activity outside a primary partnership and lesbians reporting the least. But what's interesting, coupled with that, is that lesbians actually break up twice as frequently according to these civil partnership dissolution rates. And actually now we have marriage. Actually these ratios have increased even more. For every gay male couple that gets divorced, about 4 lesbian couples get divorced. So it's really interesting, and it kind of turns on its head some of the cultural assumptions that we have about men and women, and how women are perhaps the sort of the guardians of monogamy and fidelity, and perhaps it's lifelong monogamy, now we all live so long, is actually a struggle for any of us. And so I do also think it's worth noting that lesbians do often separate very amicably, and I believe that we pioneered conscious uncoupling long before Gwyneth Paltrow, claiming that one. But what's particularly interesting is what it does say about female sexuality and the sort of the patriarchal myths that we are kind of culturally fed about female sexuality, and maybe we need to sort of dispel those myths, which was something that a book I read a few years ago attempted to do. This New York Times journalist, Daniel Bergner, had written a book, What Do Women Want? Because of course we do need a man to tell us what women want. And these cover photos are quite interesting, aren't they? I think it's a woman before and after filling in her tax return. I think that's what that is. And so I started to think maybe there's just a load of kind of assumptions around our monogamous relationships, around our sexuality, around female sexuality, and we need to start having honest conversations about what love is, about what our boundaries are, about what sex is. And so I decided to ask my respondents what other secrets they kept from their partner. And my favourite one of these was the third one down. Giving yourself the best portion of food. Who does that? Yes. Yes, absolutely. But, so the thing is, what I'm saying is, it's absolutely fine to have a monogamous relationship, but I believe that we need to have a conversation about what that means to us, and we need to redefine monogamy for the modern age. I'm married and I'm in a monogamous marriage, but because I've written these books called Is Monogamy Dead and the Breakup Monologues, it's forced us to have some conversations about it all. And I think you can actively choose monogamy if you know there maybe are different ways of having relationships. It's not a cultural default to be monogamous. Maybe there's a different way of doing things, and you can still actively choose monogamy if you so wish. But I think if you do, you have to answer the final question on my survey, which was, in a monogamous relationship, what counts as infidelity? And we're gonna vote on some of these. So who would say having sex with somebody else? Hands up. Yeah, probably, yeah. I mean, although what is sex? It's hard to define, isn't it? I mean, we're not all Bill Clinton, are we? And some of the people who responded to the survey had written in things in the comments, because obviously they did want to qualify in some way. And one person had very angrily written, in a car. And then we had kissing somebody else. Who thinks kissing somebody else would count as cheating? Yeah, so but not quite as many people. It shows how personal some of these boundaries are. It's not a universal black and white thing. My favourite line about kissing, my favourite line in The Joy of Sex is actually in the chapter about kissing, and it says, "A good mouth-to-mouth kiss should leave its recipient breathless, but not asphyxiated." Which is, it's good to know, isn't it? It's good to know. So I'll just show you how many people voted for these. So 94 people said, 94 people out of 100 said having sex with someone else. 76 said kissing. So not all that far behind. But then we move on to a kind of more emotional spectrum of monogamy, as opposed to a sort of physical spectrum of what your partner might perhaps do or not do, what they might feel, and how do you police that? So then we had falling in love with someone else without sexual contact. Who would say that? Yeah, oh, so really on the back row, they're very, yes, emotional cheating counts double. And so it's interesting because, yes, not that many less people said that falling in love with someone would count. And then we had some behaviours that fall under the banner of what we call micro-cheating, so sort of text and email flirting, all these behaviours enabled by the modern world and digital apps and technology. Who would say text or email flirting? Yeah, so if you're nodding, you're like, yeah, that's counts. So that was 62% of people. And then we had a really controversial one that caused some debate, staying up all night talking to someone else. Does anyone think that?
No.
No, we're like, we do that all the time in Eastbourne 31. And then I started to think, oh, come on, masturbating whilst thinking about someone else. Does anyone think that? No. So that was 14%. And then we had fantasising about someone else, 7%. And then finally we had looking at porn alone. Does anyone think that counts? No. But we still had 4 people who said that. Interestingly, I once had to do this talk at an event called Sunday Assembly, which is like a sort of church for non-churchy people. And so Sanderson Jones, who runs that, he had to kind of make my slides child-friendly, so he edited them. I know, it's a challenge for this talk, isn't it? We had to think very carefully about it. But he changed porn, to looking at porn alone, to looking at naughty pictures, sometimes moving. But of course, everyone thought that meant that it was a moving story, which, to be honest, a lot of lesbian porns have quite a story. Anyway, that's sort of my talk, but what I did want to say is I am one of those knobs from London, not East London, so maybe I'll get away with it, South London. So I am going to be kind of shooting back probably towards the end of the interval, but you've got a fantastic night ahead of you. And I would love you to connect with me on social media, and I do have a few copies of my books for sale this evening. And what I tend to do is I've got the Breakup, Monologues and Is Monogamy Dead, and I do a deal on the 2 books together for £20, because that's a nice even number. So if I have 4 sets of books, so 4 lovely people wanted a double set of books, I can do cash, or we can sort out backs or something like that. But I would love not to have to carry them all back on the train. I'd quite like to eat this weekend as well. So if you do want to buy books, that'd be brilliant. But if you're those people who like sort of, digital, virtual things, it's like a Kindle and audio book. If you scan that thingy there, it's on Amazon and all of that. So, but, I prefer real books, really. And frankly, when I was on the train down here, when the woman next to me got out her Kindle, I got out my Bear tapestry. And well, it's quite a boring one, actually. I haven't got to the bit yet where it gets the eye. Anyway, hope you're not reading the same Bear tapestry, that's a bit of a spoiler. Anyway, that is me. And I hope that you will come and chat in the interval before I do have to run off. And thank you, Tim, for having me, and it's always a lovely, lovely night. And yeah, do come and chat in the interval if you like a book or you just like to have a chat, but be a stalker. That's fine too. Thanks very much.
Rosie Wilby. Rosie, can you say, Rosie, just maybe a couple of